Now, Kevin Durant made his return, but it was short-lived. Second quarter, after scoring 11 points, he pulls up with what is reportedly believed to be a torn Achilles. He would have to leave the arena on crutches. How do the Warriors do without him? Let's get back to the game. Less than a minute and a half to go. Warriors found themselves down 3. Steph Curry to tie 3 of his 31 on the night. Next possession, Klay Thompson will finish off with the beautiful ball movement from deep, and he finished with 26 in this one. Final possession. Ooh. Warriors up 1. Kawhi giving up the ball. It ends up with Kyle Lowry, who cannot connect. Warriors survive this one, 106-105. They still trail in the series 3-2. Here's Draymond Green after the game talking about the loss of Kevin Durant.
You could just kind of feel the life just go right out of us. You know, to Steph's credit, you know, he kind of rallied the troops and, you know, talked to everybody, went around the huddle and just, you know, told everybody to stay locked in and do this for Kevin, you know, and I think we did a good job of, you know, coming together and leaning on each other.
All right, Nick, how did the Warriors do it? They saw what happened to Kevin Durant in the second quarter and still managed to get themselves up, rallied, and win this game.
Well, in the moments after Kevin Durant's injury, they actually went on a little mini run, and Boogie Cousins, who had been told before the game, for the first time in his career, he was going to get a DNP coach's decision. And you saw him on the bench. We didn't know at the time he had been told that, but you saw on the bench he was a little sullen and despondent when it was Looney had been in the game, Bogut had been in the game, and then you knew it might not be Boogie Cousins' night. Once KD went down, Boogie Cousins all of a sudden becomes an important part of the game. Then Kevon Looney goes down, and Boogie gives you good minutes. The first really good minutes he's given you since Game 2. And then late in the game, the Warriors stayed in it with three-point shot making throughout. 7 threes in the first quarter, 20 overall threes in the game. But then late in the game, after a very odd Nick Nurse timeout when the Raptors seemed to be taking full control of the game, the Warriors, Steph and Klay, took turns hitting threes. They had great offensive possessions in the final 3 minutes, while the Raptors had terrible offensive possessions in the final 3 minutes. And despite Steph and Klay being the only 2 real threats on the court, they got good looks. The only wide open look was the one we showed for Klay to take the lead. But that's a great look for Steph Curry. The one before was a good look for Klay Thompson, and that's a great look for Klay Thompson. And so they had their season totally on the brink in those final 3 minutes with Kawhi on fire. It felt like the momentum was sapped from the Raptors when they called a timeout, stopping their own run, and the Warriors took full advantage of it.
A couple things very, very important. Athletes from growing up, they are used to other athletes getting injured. So even with the story, with the plot with KD, is he going to be a free agent, him forcing himself back, athletes have the unbelievable ability to build focus because they see it more than other people see it. So they're able to recover in real time. Now, they were fortunate enough that because Steph and Iggy went into the locker room, they knew immediately that his Achilles. And when he fell onto the court and he began to pinch his Achilles, that's one of the signs. He didn't grab his calf, but people showed a lot of photos of the trauma, the shock once the tendon was either ruptured or strained. You could see the trauma come up into the calf, but the attachment point is right there at the bottom of that heel. And that's where he grabbed initially. So athletes have that unbelievable ability because they see it. You know, a guy gets injured on a football field, the coaches, training staff will deal with him. The coaches move you over to the next field, and you will be playing while another guy has a serious injury. So you just get kind of used to that part. Now, as far as Boogie Cousins and what he was able to do, that was a tremendous effort from a mental standpoint because you have a championship game. He's ready to make a contribution. He's told that he's not. And then he's able to he's forced into the lineup because they have to play him because he's the best offensive weapon of all the centers, even though the coach had told him he's not going to play. So for me, the Warriors at the end, they executed their offense better, and they got one more stop. Let's not think this was no 20-point blowout. This was a 1-point game, a game of inches, a game of he makes a shot, he misses a shot. Draymond gets a deflection, so we don't know. Lowry said it felt good leaving his hand. But as far as Nick Nurse, my last point before I move on, a lot of NBA coaches in this same situation They had scored 10 straight points, but in the NBA last year, they changed the rule. Once you get into the last 3 minutes of the game, you only get 2 timeouts, so you lose all the additional timeouts. So a lot of NBA coaches since last year, right before that 3-minute mark, instead of losing it, they give their guys a break right there. So Nick Nurse, if you look at the coaching philosophy, what's been happening, and you can look, the Raptors were gassed. Kawhi was gassed.
Lowry asked for the timeout.
Yeah, you could see a little confusion because Kawhi didn't know if he was going to be on the attack. Lowry was trying to stop them. So for Nick Nurse, not trying to make an excuse, but this was a rule change last year, and coaches tried to take advantage of that, and I believe that's why he called the timeout. Besides the obvious, his guys were dragging.
And once you call that one, because it's the use it or lose it timeout, basically what they call it, he actually called consecutive timeouts. He had 4 with 3 minutes left. He used them both in that same huddle. But the Warriors were in an odd spot because they had led for 41 of the first 42 minutes of this game, yet with 5.5 minutes left, they were down to just 1 timeout. See, after the Norman Powell dunk, where it seemed like everyone stopped playing defense, Kerr called his second to last timeout. And so they were, you don't want to have 0 timeouts going in the final minute of the game because you might need to advance the ball. You might need to draw something up. And so Kerr was helpless to stop the run. And I know guys were gassed, but Kawhi, it felt to me like, oh my God, Kawhi, who had a quiet game in his worst game of the finals through 3 quarters, was so alive and so in charge in that moment. I thought they'd give it another possession or 2. But then, so for me, part of the story is a timeout Nick Nurse did call, and then also a timeout they didn't call. After Boogie gets the illegal screen call, you had a timeout. It's 15 seconds left. It is a possession to win the championship. It's one thing if it's off a miss and you want to go and run and take advantage of transition, but it's sideline out of bounds in the backcourt. You have an opportunity to call timeout, draw something up, let your players know the Warriors have a foul to give, which Iggy knew. It's one of the reasons Iggy could go trap Kawhi on that final possession. He was going up there, I think, to give that foul with 4 seconds left. They don't call timeout there. They don't call timeout when the play starts going haywire. Nick Nurse has been sensational this first year. I think those final 3 minutes are tough. I think it was a questionable timeout that he did call, and then a head-scratching timeout that he didn't call to give them an opportunity to win their first NBA championship on one shot.
I do want to ask this before we move on. Yesterday, Nick, you talked about a paradigm shift in this series, that the Warriors needed something, whatever it was, whether it was real or if it was almost superficial, if you will, something that sort of shifted the momentum. Do you think the fact that you had the Splash Brothers out there hitting 23-pointers on the road, when you saw what happened to Klay Thompson earlier in the series, could that on top of what the KD's injury, could all of that be enough, CC, to shift the momentum in this series?
No, Jenna. They don't have enough offense. They're still going to struggle. Them points KD gave them earlier, they needed every one of them. Boogie Cousins still a liability on defense. He ain't in no great mental state. He bounced back in yesterday's game, but we know the Boogie Cousins. Draymond, he's still not able to hit shots. Iggy, he's not looking any healthier. They don't have a bench. No, there wasn't no galvanizing moment last night. Toronto has a huge advantage. They had 2 chances at home, and they're going back to Oracle where they just swept them in a 2 games. So, no, Toronto was still a better basketball team. Last night, they got off to a fast start, and that's what propelled them. They won the quarter. They won the first quarter, all right? Toronto won the last quarter. The other 2 quarters, they split. It is still a dominance by Toronto when you look at it. 5 games, Toronto is the better basketball team.
All right. Warriors win the game. They still trail in the series, but they do lose Kevin Durant in the process. Coming up, U.S. soccer legend Tim Howard is here to break down the Women's World Cup. It's getting exciting. Here he is.
No longer a baller, just a fashion model. Look at that. I like it.
In the game.
You clean up nice.
I try.